Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Preeti Kaur. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, talks between Hamas and Egyptian negotiators end without results in Cairo. UN vote on Gaza aid further delayed. US, South Korea, Japan call on North Korea to engage in dialogue without preconditions. Pyongyang warns of a nuclear attack. Lower House of Indian Parliament passes 3 bills on criminal law. Landmark bills set to replace British-era acts. As Israeli troops continue their ground operations in Gaza, the army has discovered a network of tunnels running deep beneath the central Gaza city. As per the military, the tunnel was found on the properties registered under the name of a senior Hamas leader. The tunnels were found when soldiers secured a central area of the city in recent days. Accessed by spiral staircase and an elevator up to 20 meters below the ground, the tunnels were facilitated with electricity, plumbing, surveillance cameras and heavy blast doors. Moreover, Israel has also accused Hamas of deliberately locating tunnels and other military infrastructure among civilians in order to use them as human shields.
As the Israeli army was operating in the area of Hamas leaders in the heart of Gaza city, where the political and military leadership of Hamas is situated, we uncovered an area that served as a base for terror that were located in civilian buildings. With the operation of ground forces and based on intelligence we received under the area of leadership, we uncovered a branch network of strategic underground bases.
There has been another delay in a Security Council vote for a humanitarian pause in Gaza. This latest delay comes at the request of the United States, which says it needs more time to consult. Jory Jacobs reports from the United Nations in New York.
It's been delay after delay. The initial vote on this current legally binding Security Council resolution was first scheduled for Monday, postponed to Tuesday, delayed to Wednesday, and now once again rescheduled. On Wednesday, the Council held close consultations to continue the negotiations, and these were followed by the announcement of yet another postponement to Thursday. Diplomats here in New York say there's growing frustration with the United States' repeated requests for delays. A major sticking point in this new text is the question of whether the United Nations should take over from Israel to inspect humanitarian shipments going into Gaza, something which the organization ordinarily does in other countries. Israel, we are told, wants the United States to reject this, as it would effectively leave it with no role in screening the shipments. But the UAE's ambassador to the UN, Lana Nasabeh, whose country tabled the resolution, told reporters on Wednesday they've been working long hours and believes giving it another go for additional diplomacy could yield positive results. She says she remains optimistic an agreement will be reached. Earlier this month, the US vetoed a similar Security Council resolution backed by almost all other council members. And while the intense political negotiations continue, the head of the UN's Children's Fund, UNICEF, has warned on Wednesday that there's barely a drop of safe water to drink in Gaza. Anwar reports now more than 20,000 people have been killed since the start of the war on October 7th. Jody Jacobs at the United Nations reporting for DD India.
Relentless efforts are being made to resume ceasefire in the conflict-inflicted Gaza Strip. Leader of Hamas visited Egypt on Wednesday for an intensive talk on the new ceasefire, but the meeting ended without any results. As per a Palestinian official, Egypt has offered a proposal for another humanitarian truce, but the idea of a temporary solution was rejected by Hamas. According to reports, Egyptians are still optimistic about the possibility of a breakthrough in the coming days, but they are convinced that the situation is difficult and the negotiations will be difficult and long. All right, shifting focus now. The top diplomats of United States, South Korea and Japan on Wednesday condemned North Korea's recent ballistic missile launches. In a joint statement, the three countries urged Pyongyang to engage in substantive dialogue without preconditions. As per the statement, the United States, Japan and South Korea stand together in opposition to North Korea's continued development of its unlawful weapons of mass destruction and ballistic missile programs. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Japanese Foreign Minister Yoko Kamikawa and South Korea's Foreign Minister Park Jin met. Meanwhile, the United States flew long-range bombers for joint drills with South Korea and Japan on Wednesday. The drill aimed at strengthening the country's joint response, and it comes after the North performed its first intercontinental ballistic missile test in 5 months. The exercise involved B-1B bombers and South Korean and Japanese fighter jets. It said that as of now, the U.S. bomber has been temporarily deployed near and over the Korean peninsula this year, while the B-1B is capable of carrying a large conventional weapons payload. Amidst the development, North Korean leader Kim Jongun has said that Pyongyang would not hesitate with a nuclear attack when an enemy provokes it with nuclear weapons. He said the resolute military activity conducted by the company this time was a clear explanation of the offensive counteraction mode and the evolution of nuclear strategy and the doctrine of the DPRK not to hesitate even a nuclear attack when the enemy provokes it with nukes. Kim made the remark as he met with soldiers under military's Missile Bureau over its recent launching drill of an intercontinental ballistic missile. Let's get to updates on Russia-Ukraine crisis now. The U.S. Congress is not expected to pass any additional funding for Ukraine before the new year, as lawmakers remain divided over support for almost 2-year conflict. The Senate has remained in Washington this week in the hope of a last-minute deal. Nick Harper gets us details from Washington.
Senate Democrats and Republicans have confirmed they do not expect a deal will get done before the end of this year, leaving Ukraine in an uncertain position heading into 2024. In a joint statement, negotiators said they were making encouraging progress, but that challenging issues remain. Namely, the Republican demand that Ukraine funding needs to be paired with additional funding to beef up security at the US's southern border with Mexico. Republicans say tougher immigration controls are needed to prevent tens of thousands of migrants crossing the border illegally every week. A visit to Washington by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky earlier this month failed to elicit a deal, with Republicans refusing to budge despite Zelensky's in-person plea for more help. The US is Ukraine's biggest backer in terms of financial military assistance. President Joe Biden has been pushing for Congress to pass roughly $61 billion of new aid for Ukraine. Washington and Kiev have warned that Ukrainian troops are fast running out of supplies to continue their fight against Russia, with warnings that Moscow could win if new support is not approved by Congress. Nick Harper in Washington, reporting for DD India.
All right, moving now, French President Emmanuel Macron has defended a controversial immigration reform, describing it as a shield. Macron, in his first interview after the reform was voted into law, said the legislation passed by MPs on Monday was needed to cut an influx of illegal migrants. Macron faced cracks within his ruling alliance after Parliament passed the bill, spurring the resignation of the health minister amid tensions over the new legislation. The French president insisted the law's toughest dispositions would help counter Marine Le Pen's far-right national rally by undercutting its rhetoric on immigration.
Fighting against illegal immigration is, I think, hard to consider as a strictly right-wing policy. And when I see the popular electorate, they are in favor of that. When you live in working-class neighborhoods, you have security difficulties. Sometimes immigration that is not well controlled, the consequences of which you experience. Well, you are in favor of this law.
Le programme que veut faire Madame Le
Migrants seeking entry to the United States continue to wait at an outdoor processing center in Eagle Pass, Texas, into the early hours, following the passage of a new Republican-backed state law that gives Texas officials broad powers to arrest, prosecute and deport people who illegally cross the border. Migrants have continued to arrive. U.S. border officials closed 2 rail bridges that move freight between Texas and Mexico after detecting a surge in the smuggling of migrants through Mexico by train. The move by U.S. Customs and Border Protection was the latest in a series of similar closures along the border in order to redeploy enforcement resources elsewhere. Ireland has announced legal action on Wednesday against the UK government in the European Court of Human Rights over a law granting immunity to combatants in the Northern Ireland conflict. The law, passed in September, stops most prosecutions for alleged killings by armed groups and British soldiers during the Troubles, the 3 decades of violence in which over 3,000 people died. Many groups on the island of Ireland are vehemently opposed to the new law, including victims' families, human rights organizations, and all major political parties. Venezuela's government freed at least 20 opposition-linked prisoners and 10 Americans in exchange for the U.S. release of an ally of President Nicolas Maduro. The Maduro ally is Colombian businessman Alex Saab, who was granted clemency by U.S. President Joe Biden and returned to Venezuela on Wednesday. As part of the deal, all 6 Americans classified by the U.S. as wrongfully detained in Venezuela were released and are on their way home, along with 4 other Americans. Venezuela also returned to the United States the fugitive Malaysian businessman Leonard Glenn Francis, also known as Fat Leonard, who is implicated in a U.S. Navy bribery case. Venezuelan president said that the swap marked a step towards a new era of diplomatic relations with the United States. And now we take a look at election-related stories making it to the headlines from across the world. Elections in the Democratic Republic of Congo have been extended after widespread delays, opposition, allegations of fraud, violence, and logistical setbacks. Voting in the country's presidential and legislative elections began on Wednesday after almost a 3-hour delay. Congo's president, Felix Tshisekedi, who is vying for a second term, casted his vote in the Central African nation's general elections. Delays were reported in several towns in Congo's east and in the capital Kinshasa. Voting materials had not arrived at the polling stations and voter lists were not published. Tshisekedi is competing against around 24 opposition challengers in the hope of a second term running the mineral-rich yet poverty-stricken nation. Russian former television journalist Yarina Danoa put her name forward to stand in country's presidential election in March. Danoa presented documents to Russia's Central Election Commission to register as a candidate. Danoa called in an interview last month for an end to conflict in Ukraine and the release of political prisoners, including opposition leader Alexei Navalny. Also, Danoa hopes to challenge President Vladimir Putin, promoting a vision of a humane Russia that's peaceful and friendly. If accepted as an independent candidate, the former journalist would next need to gather 300,000 signatures of support from at least 40 Russian regions. Supporters of Serbia's opposition protested in Belgrade for the 3rd consecutive day after the elections. Opposition leader Miroslav Aleksic told media that the protest that their lawyers had requested the annulment of the elections on December 17th at all levels and called on the international community to give its support. The ruling populist Serbian Progressive Party won 46.72% of the votes. SNS gained an unfair advantage through media bias, the improper influence of President Alexander Vučić, according to an international monitoring mission. The European Union and the United States urged Serbia on Wednesday to address concerns about its electoral process. Thousands of people took to the streets of Buenos Aires to protest against the government's economic shock measures in the first real test for Argentina's new libertarian president, Javier Milei. Argentina's president signed an economic reform decree that will end limits on exports and authorize measures to loosen regulations as his new government combats a severe economic crisis. Milei, who took office earlier this month, has announced sweeping plans to reform the economy and crack down on protests in recent days. We're heading for a short break, but still to come on this edition of DD India Live. Nation braces up for the COVID surge. Stay with us as we get to preparedness of the public health system in New Delhi. Indian Army heroes save lives of 3 passengers stuck in a car in floodwaters in Tamil Nadu. Up next, we get you more on the heroic feat accomplished. And France is prepared to change Olympic opening ceremony plans if security requires, says President Emmanuel Macron. Welcome back after the break. You're watching DD India Live and I'm Preeti. Let's get to updates from India now. On the 13th day of the winter session, the Lok Sabha passed 3 revised criminal law bills. Now these bills are Bharatiya Nyay 2nd Sanhita 2023, the Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha 2nd Sanhita 2023 and the Bharatiya Sakshay 2nd Bill 2023 in Lok Sabha on December 20th. Now these 3 bills replace the Indian Penal Code of 1860, Code of Criminal Procedure of 1973 and Indian Evidence Act of 1872. Here's a detailed report.
India's Home Minister Amit Shah on Wednesday said that the country's criminal laws are being amended in line with the Constitution and for the welfare of its citizens. Mob lynching has been included as an offence among new provisions. Also, greater access to technology will improve the criminal justice delivery. He was speaking in the House of the People or the Lok Sabha.
हमने व्यक्ति की जगह देश को रखा है। व्यक्ति की टीका ये लोकतंत्र का सबसे अच्छा लक्षण है और देश को नुकसान करने वाले को कभी बख्शना नहीं चाहिए। ये दृढ़ता भी इसमें है। राजद्रोह को इतने साल के बाद देशद्रोह में परिवर्तित करने का काम ये कानून करेगा।
The 3 bills are the Bharatiya Nyay Sanhita 2023, the Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita 2023 and also the Bharatiya Sakshay Bill 2023. These bills replace the British era laws.
यहाँ पर कानून बनेगा, इसका इम्प्लीमेंटेशन कार्यपालिका करेगी और इसका बाकी रहा हुआ इम्प्लीमेंटेशन न्यायपालिका करेगी। ये तीनों अंग इकट्ठा होकर इस देश में भारतीय विचार की न्याय प्रणाली को प्रस्तापित करेंगे।
Amit Shah said that the British era laws were aimed at protecting foreign rule and the new bills are people-centric. The 3 bills will replace the Indian Penal Code of 1860, the Code of Criminal Procedure or the CRPC of 1973 and the Indian Evidence Act of 1872.
अब ये जो कानून आ रहे हैं वो हमारी संविधान की मूल 3 चीजें व्यक्ति की स्वतंत्रता, मानव के अधिकार और सबके साथ समान व्यवहार ये 3 सिद्धांतों के आधार पर बनाए जा रहे कानून है।
The Bharatiya Nyay Sanhita Bill 2023, Section 113 has defined terrorism, bringing it in line with Section 15 of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act of 1967 and making it more stringent. It covers activities like counterfeit Indian paper currency, coins or any other material. Harboring a terrorist voluntarily and knowingly is also punishable, as is recruiting and training persons to do terrorist acts. An officer not below the rank of Superintendent of Police will decide if the prosecution of a terrorist act should continue under the UAPA or the Section 113 of this bill. It attracts the death penalty or life imprisonment. It also defines cruelty against a woman by her husband and his relatives, punishable with a jail term of up to 3 years under a newly inserted Section 86. Unauthorized publication of court proceedings is another new provision under Section 73. It stipulates that those who print or publish any court proceedings in rape or sexual assault cases without permission would be punished with a 2-year jail sentence and a fine. It replaces mental illness by unsoundness of mind and adds the term intellectual disability along with unsoundness of mind in Section 367. The new bill now penalizes mob lynching at par with murder. It also redefines petty organized crime. The Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita Bill of 2023. Community service has been added as a form of punishment for petty offences under Section 23. Magistrates have been empowered to impose this punishment. In line with the technological advancement, reading out of charges, examination of witnesses, recording of evidence and audiovisual means are part of the revised bill. The Bharatiya Sakshay Bill. The bill has been revised to state that the admissibility of an electronic record is subject to Section 63. Oral evidence includes statements made before courts by witnesses in relation to a fact under inquiry. After 163 years, the IPC is being changed. Some would say it's about time. Bureau Report, TD India.
Let's take a look at other stories making it to the headlines from across India now. Hospitals in India are prepared to fight against the new variant JN1 of COVID. The hospitals have been directed by the central government to be fully prepared with all necessary medication available. So far, no increase in hospitalization rates have been witnessed due to the COVID surge. On the new JN1 variant of SARS-CoV-2, Union Health Ministry informed that the variant is currently under intense scientific scrutiny, but not a cause of immediate concern. Indian Army rescues 3 passengers from a car stuck in floodwaters in the South Indian state of Tamil Nadu. The state has witnessed continuous rainfall across several districts for the last 2 days and is battling with the devastating floods. The authorities are carrying out rescue operations at a war footing. Indian Army and Air Force have also joined the rescue operation and are helping the stranded people. The central government of India is also assisting the state government. 2 idols of Lord Sri Ram made of glass fiber have been sent to Ayodhya by a sculptor of West Bengal. Mohammad Jamaluddin was assisted by his son in making 2 idols of about 15 to 16 feet height. Now, these 2 idols reached Ram Temple in Ayodhya ahead of the inauguration ceremony. For the Christmas celebrations in the Indian state of Karnataka, India's tallest Christmas tree has been set up. Towering at an impressive height of 100 feet, the colossal tree stands as a centerpiece at Bengaluru's Phoenix Mall of Asia. The colossal tree is a beacon of holiday cheer, adorned with enchanting decoration and featuring lively elves and Santa Claus spreading joy in the surrounding area. With the gargantuan tree as the focal point, the Phoenix Mall of Asia has become an exemplary sight to witness Christmas cheer and celebrations. Let's get to updates from the world of business now. European Union finance ministers reached an agreement on Wednesday on reforms that will loosen budget rules to encourage investment while keeping debt and spending under control. The reform comes after national debt levels were pushed to new record highs by pandemic recovery programs and with the region needing to embark on new spending to keep its climate, industrial policy and security goals on track. The deal will now be negotiated with the European Parliament before it becomes a law. The deal is the 4th reform of the EU fiscal rules called Stability and Growth Pact, meant to underpin the value of EU's single euro currency by limiting government borrowing. The agreement will, however, have no impact on the EU's fiscal policy in 2024 because national budgets for next year have already been decided on the basis of guidelines agreed earlier in 2023. Stocks across the globe tumbled on Wednesday as investors engaged in some profit bookings amid markets hitting new highs. The Dow and NASDAQ slipped about 1.3% and 1.5% to notch their worst sessions since October. Wednesday's session also snapped 9-day winning streaks for both. The pullback comes after a robust session on Tuesday when the Dow and the NASDAQ composite both registered 9 straight days of gains. In the Indian markets, the benchmark indices Sensex and Nifty also ended in the red on Wednesday. At the closing bells, the Sensex was down 930.88 points or 1.3% at 70,506.31, and the Nifty was down 302.9 points or 1.41% at 21,150.2. In Japan, Nikkei and Korea's Kospi were down, trading in the red during the early hours on Thursday. In a landmark case in Britain, a US computer scientist lost his bid to register patents over inventions on behalf of his AI system. Stephen Thaler, creator of Dabu's AI, wanted 2 patents in the UK for inventions devised by the AI. However, UK's Intellectual Property Office rejected the request on grounds that the inventor must be a human or a company. The similar decision was upheld by UK Supreme Court. UK is not the first place to reject the request. Australian, European Union, United States and New Zealand have all denied Thaler's patents demand. The scientist only found success when he was granted patent in South Africa, which then became the first country ever to give patents to AI for In sports, in response to heightened security tensions across Europe, French President Emmanuel Macron stated on Wednesday that France is ready to relocate the 2024 Olympic opening ceremony from the planned River Seine location if the security situation demands it. Macron revealed the existence of contingency plans, including Plan B and Plan C, emphasizing a cautious approach to potential security threats. He expressed reluctance to alter plans hastily, but acknowledged the possibility of triggering an alternative if the level of insecurity requires us to revisit the initial scheme. That's it in this edition of DD India Live. But let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X and also Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Preeti Gaur signing off, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Live.